performing back at Blackthorn 51 in Queens.
Wonderful.
So if you're around, pull up.
And I'll shout that out again next week on my show. So thank you for coming on, China Mac, and thank you for participating in Unlock. And I'll look forward to having you back here again when
Thank
a
you
new
for having
album
me.
comes on. So we're going to shout that out and support that.
Definitely.
So again, we got China Mac with us, sounding off, and I hope y'all stay tuned for next week.
So hold on. The brothers get to listen to this, and did they listen to this?
Some facilities.
Oh, yo, if you in there, man, and you listening, yo, Rikers Island, or if you up top, if you wherever, yo, I send my salute to you, man. Hold your head up there, man, and you know, yo, stay up, man.
My man. So Unlock with your host, Ricky Jones. Stay with us. I'll see y'all next week.
Veterans have difficulty transitioning their military skills into civilian jobs. In New York City, an estimated 17,300 veterans are unemployed. Are you a veteran in desperate need of help? Do you want to take advantage of a life-changing opportunity? If so, the 369th Veterans Outreach Program is designed to assist veterans in Harlem and surrounding communities. Veteran services include resume preparation, interview workshops, access to interview attire, and reliable transportation. For more information, call the 369th Veterans Outreach Program at 646-533-9292.
CNN.com recently named New York City as the most stressful city in the United States because of the high cost of living, long commutes, and overcrowded conditions. Some New Yorkers combat stress with exercise and fun activities in Central Park. But if stress has become too overwhelming for you to cope with, there is help. Harlem Hospital has an outpatient clinic that can help you deal with stress, alcoholism, anger management, and substance abuse. Seminars and workshops are held at Harlem Hospital on West 137th Street between Lenox and Fifth Avenues on the 4th floor. Workshops are held Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to noon. Call 212-939-3210 for more information.
If you know the symptoms and get the facts, you'll know the signs of a heart attack. Women, listen to me, and when I'm done, if it sounds familiar, call 911.
Pain in your neck, chest,
Arms or jaw,
shortness of breath.
please tell us more. Cold sweats and nausea, tiredness,
It's time to take it
serious. Back pain, stomach pain, shortness of breath, cold sweats, nausea, dizziness. If you know the symptoms and heed the signs, you'll be around for a long, long time. Women, listen to me, and when I'm done, if any sound familiar, call 911.
Learn a song that could save your life. Get a free download at womenshealth.gov/heart attack.
Women, listen to me, and when I'm done, if any sound familiar, call 911. If any sound familiar, call 911.
A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
911.
I found out on my way to Harlem, Ellington, you don't live around here.
Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community. I'm Stu Reed. I'm here with Alina Marvin.
Hiya.
Hey, Alina, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, and yourself?
I'm great, thank you.
Um,
And
We've also got
we
Dave.
also got Dave Burstein on the line. Dave, are you there?
I'm waiting by.
Okay, great. Well, just remind our listeners and viewers, we are streaming live on whcr.org. So if you want to take a look at Lena's lovely visage,
You can see both our mugs right
yes.
here on the radio.
as well as on 90.3 FM, the Voice of Harlem.
And if you can see through the radio, I'm a little concerned, but you've got a little technical know-how on that one. No, you can just tune in on your radio, and you can see us on the stream.
Mhm.
Do you like the cameras?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
See, I felt nervous about them for a long time.
I kind of ignore them as
Yeah.
as I sit here in this seat.
See, I just repointed it. Like when
Okay.
I sat down, I was like, okay, you're
Mhm.
gonna be right there. So
Mhm.
the one that's right in my face is
Mhm.
pointed a little more at the microphone, and I
Mhm.
think should it be at my face, and then I just don't worry about it.
Well, I think, as you know, my partner, business partner, Doug Frazier, and I were kind of responsible for getting this
And they're
video
lovely.
streaming going.
And
So
people are engaged.
yeah,
They
yeah,
love it.
Yeah. So for the longest, I was on the other side of the camera, and it's just been recently, since I've been hosting along with you and Dave, Community and Technology, that I'm in front of the camera. So I'm still kind of getting used to it. Matter of fact, I got critiqued last week, Dave. Somebody said, "Stu, why didn't you point the camera at yourself? The entire show, you were out of frame." And I was like, duh.
That is always a good
Yeah.
question. I'm now lowering the mic.
Okay.
All right, there we go.
So anyway, we're here today, and I wanted to open up. I wanted to talk a little bit. You know, so often in our previous shows, we've talked about the technology, the hardware, the widgets, the gadgets, what they do and how they work and who has them. I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of having versus not having. The New York Times ran a couple of stories yesterday that talked about the entrenched digital divide in our own backyards, i.e., the United States of America. And a companion article that talked about the problem that young people, teenagers in particular, are having in school by not having access to the internet at home, and also by not having access to computers at home. Lena, did you get a chance to look at any of those stories?
I did. I got
Yeah.
a chance to look at both of them, and I
Mhm.
thought they were interesting. And it actually reminded me of so I graduated high school 2004. So that's it's a little while ago now, but fairly recent.
Mhm.
And there was a difference, and imagining the difference between how I was in high school, how I was in junior high, and how I was in college. There's very different digital landscapes, different expectations. I was blessed. I had a computer in junior high, and I was typing out papers at home. And
you had internet at
and I
home
had
as a young
internet
person,
at home,
right? Yeah.
which was fantastic. But I could tell at the time that I had a privilege, that I was able to do something that other kids in my class couldn't do.
Does that give you an edge?
It did. It absolutely did. I had one class where, in a classic social engineering hacker mentality, the teacher at the time, it was 8th grade, said, bring in menus with caloric information from restaurants and you can get 5 extra points. And I'm a little hacker at the time, so I said, do you have a limit on how many? And she said, no. And I said, can I get them online? And she said, sure. And I'd already found a website that had pretty much every single restaurant's full caloric information, because that has to be turned in. So I just printed out, and I'd not been doing well in the class, and I turned them in, and she looked at me and she went, you have a B now. And I went, all right, I'll accept that, because before that I did not have a B.
Right.
But I actually gave her more points than there were for the class, because you could just print them out, and it was something that she hadn't conceptualized.
And all that was about having
I
access
had the internet.
online and having a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that edge still exists. There is still a difference, but now it isn't the same as it was before. Because it's not about whether or not you have access. A lot of people have access. In a lot of ways, there are people who try to claim that mobile phones make it so the digital divide is gone.
That's not true.
It's
according,
just not
according
true.
to this latest
Because
report.
you can't write an essay on a phone.
Yeah.
Well, you can, actually. I know people who've done it. I know a woman who was applying for a job, and she wrote her whole resume on her phone, because she knew phones, she didn't know computers. But she knew her phone, she knew the apps there, and it was just this totally different kind of knowledge and interaction. But that is hard to do.
And tedious and slow.
If you get if you have a smartphone, you can get Google Docs on there. The big trick you should still learn to type. You should just get a Bluetooth keyboard. You can pick them up for $15, but that's still a lot of money. Like that's not easy for everybody.
Do they have keyboard courses in junior high anymore?
They did for me. I think
Yeah.
they still have them. But the feeling of getting to go to a computer lab, I don't think is quite the same as it used to be. Because when I went, there was such a deep joy in you get to go to the computers, and that's so cool because everybody didn't have them at home. But yeah, I think it's less of a thing, but still around.
Well, you know, one of the notions that this article, one of these articles talked about that kind of got my interest was, and I'm quoting now from one of the consultants that worked on the report that says, we need to make sure that technology does not exacerbate the disparities between the haves and the have-nots instead of ameliorating them. And that's quite a notion, that technology could make things worse for society as a whole as opposed to improve it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
We've known since the days of the Luddites in the early 19th century that there often are losers, even if on total you're not doing so badly. And that's clearly happening now. Ask any newspaper reporter, a third of whom have lost their jobs in the last 15 years.
But, you
There's
know,
a lot of prices paid because of technology. But let me interrupt for a moment. I have both articles linked live at our website, comtech.nyc.
Now that's
COMTECH.NYC, not .com.
that's a great URL. I really like it.
okay, so our listeners, if you want to get a little more in-depth background as we talk about this stuff, please go to our site and check it out. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Well, actually, I want to hear from you. How big a problem do you think this is compared to things like lousy teachers, lousy schools, parents who are working 2 jobs and don't have time to spare for their kids?
Well, all those are factors. You know, given that this is a community and technology show, you know, I choose to focus on that aspect. And I think it's something that can be solved and can be addressed, perhaps, you know, more easily than making parents better parents or improving teacher education. That one is very difficult. I know my sister who has a PhD and my dad who's gone on now, but going back the last 30, 40, maybe 50 years, they worked in teacher education going back to the 60s. And there have been so many goodwill people on both the federal and state levels that have tried to attack that one. And that problem just seems, I won't say impossible to solve, but certainly very, very difficult.
I agree. I think the notion of the intersectionality of the problem is important, but if we just focus on the one aspect, this one real issue, that there is a difference between students who go through having access to computers and students who go through who don't. And I do feel like I should say that I think mobile phones and having data that way is incredibly helpful in that particular imbalance, and the cheap tablets that have come out, but there is still a difference. Like I was helping a person who was completely technologically literate with their phone, but trying to pull it over to the computer to finish the resume. This was not a person. This is someone who I'm like, okay, you were able to get all of this out on your phone. You should be getting extra points. Like you shouldn't be penalized if you've gotten over that hurdle. But you will be, because you can't get the formatting to look right. You can't.
And as most of our listeners probably know, you will not get through high school, let alone college, if you can't write, if you can't put together term papers, if you can't put together written theses. And so it's very critical. And to your point, Lena, there's been a lot of statistics that show that Black and Latino folks, especially young folks, are ahead of the curve in terms of smartphone adoption. we have more smartphone adoption than the rest of the general population, which is a good thing. But in terms of laptops, we're behind the curve. I'm reading from the Common Sense Media report that was referenced to yesterday in the Times. It says 1/5 of teenagers in low-income households reported that they never used a computer for their homework. That's 20%.
So
That's incredible.
I remember being sent to a computer lab to finish homework. Like, there was a computer lab around for purposes of homework. And I'm wondering if those have, if those have been phased out, if not all schools have them. My guess is not all schools have them, because it is, it's a pain to take care of an entire lab when you're already underfunded, when there are these issues that are already at hand. So I kind of want to give some weird advice, because I do love the nuts and bolts of it, and this is taking away from the problem itself. It is possible, if your only interface is a phone, it is possible to get a keyboard that can plug into your phone.
Really? How does that work?
You can, it depends on your phone, but Bluetooth is the easiest way, so it's not physically plugged in, but it's connected.
Wirelessly?
Yeah, and I would say if you are someone who's trying to write a book on your phone, that's trying to write an article, that's trying to write a term paper, that's trying to write an essay, being able to get that piece of technology could actually be incredibly helpful.
Okay, tell us about where you could find something like this. Is it generally available in the retail electronic stores?
It is. It's generally available. You can pick them up for, I'd say, anywhere between 10 and as much as you wanted to pay for one. You could probably get one. And they're usually marketed to connect with an iPad. So an iPad keyboard. So they're usually a little smaller, they're portable, you just toss a couple AA batteries in them. And then the other technology, which is free, is, I'd say Google Docs is the best way to go. Because you really can, and I've seen people do it, write an essay on the subway train on their phone. Like, you can do it, it's just horrible.
Let me just walk through the process. I'm a student, I don't have a laptop, but I have a smartphone.
Yeah.
So I go find one of these portable wireless keyboards.
Bluetooth,
Bluetooth keyboard. That's probably advertised to be an iPad keyboard, but it'll still work with my Android phone, will it? Yes.
Yeah, because it's an Android. It's
get
a
one
Bluetooth protocol.
I get one of these keyboards, and then I go online, and do I have to download software to my phone?
Usually all you have to do is the same syncing technique you do between it and what you do with an iPad or a computer that has Bluetooth.
Once I'm synced, though, how do I go to Google Docs? Is that what you're recommending?
That's what I'd be recommending. So you need to get the Google Docs app. And this is actually something that will work both on iOS, iPhone, iPad devices, and Android. But what's nice is you may have trouble getting the formatting totally correct on the phone. So if you have a little bit of time at a computer, you can do most of it, because most of it's input. And so I kind of think of it as baking and frosting. The process of baking a thing takes longer than the process of frosting, unless you're getting really detail oriented. So the formatting itself is actually a little easier, and you can even find online templates for essays for different style guides. So in college there's APA, MLA, other style rules, and you can actually just get a demo document where it says, like sample title, and then it has the Laura Ibsen or whatever fake text in the body, and you can just replace those things, and it'll be formatted correctly or close to correctly, and then you get going.
So it sounds like it's a great way for your maybe first and second draft, maybe not final draft.
Well, it depends on how you think of draft.
Okay.
But yeah, it's really. So the whole notion of drafts starts to get a little wonky when you get into the virtual world. But yeah, you can start by just getting it all in there, getting your main ideas in. It's really just the formatting that's harder to do on your phone.
Okay, so you can basically write your term paper, write your letters, write your thesis using this portable, inexpensive keyboard.
And your phone.
And your phone.
Yeah.
And going to Google Docs online.
I'd say it's possible. It's not as comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And you can save them as PDF and email them and print them out somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So there are hacks, but the thing is that there's this. It's still not fair.
Yeah, sure
Like-
it's not. Well, the reason we're talking about this as a shortcut, as a workaround, if you will, is that 25%, 1/4 of teenagers in households that earn less than $35,000 own laptops.
Yeah.
So that means 75% of households with less than $35,000 in income have laptops. So that's a huge amount of young people that are in school that are unable to use laptops. Even if they had internet, they don't have a laptop to do their work on.
I know that there are some school districts that have started giving out laptops
Mm-hmm.
to their students, and then they have to come back. But those laptops tend to have little quirks that come with them, such as the school district that spied on every single one of its students by turning the webcam on.
Wow. Mm.
So I understand if folks are a little resistant to
Mhm.
when these pieces of electronics are
Mhm.
brought into their home from a school system they don't necessarily trust.
Mhm.
So there are these questions of who owns what material that's
Mhm.
going into this.
Dave, do you have any experience with these portable keyboards and interfacing with smartphones that Lena's been talking about?
I haven't done it with smartphones, but I've done it with a 7-inch tablet, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great, but when I'm traveling, that's very convenient. I
Mhm.
usually don't take a laptop with me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of those tablets are getting cheap, under $100 these days.
There is a $50 tablet from Amazon,
Mhm.
which I have, 7 inches, perfectly fine for almost everything you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
from checking your email to watching HDTV.
Okay, so you parent.
Amazon is essentially subsidizing it because they want to sell you some of that TV and a few
Mhm.
books. But I probably spend 20 hours a week reading on that particular unit.
Mhm.
There are better, with slightly better screens, but this one's perfectly adequate.
Mhm. So you parents out there that may be listening, that where your child's maybe going into junior high school or maybe starting high school and you can't quite afford that new laptop, this is a way to give them that same capability, same functionality, so they can compete with the other kids in the classroom. Small, portable keyboard, as cheap as $10, and
It's easier to get for around 13.
Okay, $13, and a 7-inch tablet for around $50 from Amazon, and you're in business.
I would say it's a fairly good way to go, and it's an interesting kind of technological space to be in, because it is difficult. Like cheaper tablets, cheaper keyboards, they do tend to be a little fragile. That can be an issue. There are other places you can go depending on how you want to do it. I actually had a phone for a while. I think it's very valuable to research what the phone you get can do, because there are often like kind of hidden abilities in the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a Evo 3D phone, and I liked it. It was a fun phone. The weirdest thing I found out about it was I could actually plug a special converter into its power line,
Mm-hmm.
into where I plugged it in for power.
Right.
I had to also plug a power line into it. So it was like a little coupler.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could plug it into HDMI. So I could put it into a full screen.
Wow. So you could use your smartphone, put it into a big screen. So in the example that we're talking, you could hook that up to your big flat screen TV with your portable keyboard.
Yeah.
And-
Or in my case, a small LCD that I got from a friend.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
I had an LCD monitor I got from a friend. It had an HDMI cable. I plugged it right in. And that's an but I didn't do it because I had to do it so I could write a paper.
Mhm.
I did it because my phone can do this?
Right.
Really?
Right.
The main place I look at phone specs and try to find out more about any given one, phonescoop.com. I can't recommend that site enough. I love it.
SCOOP.
Mm-hmm.
Phonescoop.com.
The coolest feature, especially for the budget-minded, is maybe you're contacting. It depends on the different ways. Like, I know that both you and I recommend prepaid plans, and because in the long run they save you money and they have more freedom to them. But if you're trapped within a network already, they will sometimes offer you phone, and even my prepaid plans suggest some phones. Like, they're like, this is a pack of phones you could buy from us.
Right.
With Phone Scoop, I can put in the models of each phone and do a side-by-side comparison.
Wow.
It'll tell me this one has this much battery life, that's this much talk time. It has these different tech features, it has this form factor. And it will compare each side-by-side, including reviews and comments from folks who have that phone. And it's almost entirely populated by phone nerds. So it's people get real specific. But being able to really know how powerful is the device in your pocket.
And a couple of features just to review briefly again for our listeners out there. One is Bluetooth capability. I guess a lot. I won't say most, but I know a lot of phones have that, maybe most. And HDMI output.
Some of them do.
That's big.
Yeah. Although, it depends, because some of them also have screen mirroring. And so I am actually able to make my phone mirror onto my Roku.
Okay.
So, like, you can get stuff, you can kind of hack certain systems. So if you have, you can pick up a Roku stick for $40. And at this point, it's like, well, you're talking about a lot of money here, but it depends on how you're looking at it. If you're cutting your cable and you're replacing it with a Roku, you've just saved that much money. If you aren't buying a laptop and you're just going to have this phone and you're not going to have, like, it depends on what's going on. But figuring out what are your priorities, what can you actually fund, I would say the most freedom is probably with the 7-inch tablet that Dave was talking about. Because that is actually...
And it's a little bit small for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I particularly wanted to come in with that because one of the things it's small for is looking at PDF documents, which have all the formatting of the original page.
Yeah.
And on a 7-inch, you can scroll through it, but it's painful. And on a 10-inch, you get something much closer in size to the original page.
That's very true.
Yeah. So that's a reason to go for 10 inches, 12 inches. In fact, having lost my 10-incher, I'm thinking of replacing it because it's handy for reading textbook-type things.
So
Because most people don't read textbooks. But it's also good for art books and for children's picture books.
So you recommend 10-inch tablet
I do as well.
for folks that are doing any kind of serious productivity work, writing, reading, working on in a PC-like environment.
But once you're starting to get into that realm, around that same price point, you might want to look at Chromebooks. It doesn't have a full operating system. It is a little laptop. And those range in prices from, I think, like $150 to as much as you want to spend.
What's a Chromebook, Lena? Break that down for our listeners.
It's just a laptop. A Chromebook is just a laptop that has various things it can't do. It's not running Windows. You can't install various games on it. You can't install various software on it. It kind of is just a portal into Google's ecosystem.
Does it have a hard drive, or does it everything online?
It tries to do everything online. It can kind of keep working if it's offline. Because it can save its Google Docs offline. It does have space for files, but part of it is if anything goes wrong with the software, when you reboot, it might just delete everything. So it's a really good idea to, if you're using a Chromebook, to have your own USB stick for your files.
So it does take flash drives. You can stick them in. Okay.
You can put in flash drives. You can put in another mouse and keyboard if you don't like the one that comes on the laptop. That's a thing a lot of people have problems with. Usually you can plug it into HDMI, so you can put it into a projector. My husband has one that has a touch screen, which is more intuitive for some people. Some people are much more comfortable if they're able to touch the screen. Other folks, like myself, actually don't want to touch the screen or the mouse. I do everything with keyboard combinations.
Okay.
I have-
yeah.
I just-
That's old school, man.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of
But
interest
it's
in clicking on
faster,
stuff.
isn't it?
It is. I think it's faster. But also, I just recently got okay, so this is sad. My most powerful computer I've ever had is a 2009 MacBook desktop that a friend gave me because he didn't want it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It has 500 gigabytes, it has 4 gigs of RAM, and it's got a quad-core tube something gigahertz processor. And sadly, it is the most powerful machine I've ever had. And a friend of mine pointed out, and you don't even need that much power. And I was like, nope, I don't. Because a Chromebook with low specs, not very powerful. Honestly, it's all about battery life to me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay,
have the
so
advantage of being on the phone, so I've got my computer in front of me, so I've got some facts about what you've just been talking. Lena was right on target. I went to Newegg.com, a fairly good seller that I've used for 10 years, and looked at Chromebooks. They have one being dumped at a really low price. A Hewlett Packard, fairly good one, dual core and so on, 10 inches. Screen is, I think it's 10 inches. I'm not seeing it here. $149.95 free shipping, and I don't think they charge New York State tax. And the screen is 11.8, so it's almost 12 inches. And actually, when you're working on something, that kind of space helps. Now,
Yeah.
that is assuming there's nothing wrong with it, and both Hewlett Packard and Newegg are responsible enough. I'd probably take a chance. A bargain.
Yeah.
Most of the ones that I'd want to buy are at about the 150 to 180 if you go for what they're calling refurbished, one of which I had die on me, or a little bit over 200. But by the time you get a 10-inch tablet and a keyboard, you're not that far behind. Let me take
Although if
something-
you're real poor, that matters. Especially because you can buy one, use it before you have to invest in the other one. You can get the tablet, it's already
Right.
useful to you. You can start learning different keyboard layouts, different whatevers. So I would say, depending on what you're looking at, if your budget is such that you need to kind of space expenses out, saving up, if you have the phone already, get the keyboard, save up for the tablet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you the tough question. You've been talking about how getting a high school kid or a junior high school kid a computer to have at home is going to make a difference in education. And it certainly can happen that way. The best example I can think of is a Supreme Court Justice, Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote a wonderful autobiography about growing up poor in the Bronx and the kind of community she found despite being poor. Her parents laid out money they couldn't afford to get her an encyclopedia when she was a kid, the big one. And she said that encyclopedia, which she spent hours and hours reading, inspired her to get more involved in school. And she went on to a distinguished career. As I say, she's on the Supreme Court now. I've taught a lot of people how to use computers, including the programs and the projects in Queens. There are a handful of people who really get into it, and it changes their lives. But for 90+% of the people, I think it's small. So if we had some way to measure how much it would improve the school possibilities of a poor kid to get a $200 computer, would you think it's a 1% improvement, a 10% improvement, a 30% improvement?
I'd say 65 or more.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing is that part of what... So when you say it doesn't make you've experienced a lot of people who it doesn't make a lot of difference if they have this computer or not. I've actually experienced the exact opposite. I've worked with a number of people where I've tutored them, although a very different population of folks. I sell tutoring. I have sat down with people being paid when I first started tutoring. I was a whole $10 an hour, which was pretty good since I started when I was about 13. It was more than triple what I was making babysitting. But I continued that until I topped out at $100 an hour for tutoring because I went to richer and richer people who did not understand their computers. And because I started getting a life, I kept raising my rates until I figured people would say no. People kept saying yes, so I kept coming over. But these people wanted to connect to roots that were farther away. They wanted to understand what is Facebook. They wanted to do online shopping. So much of the internet is focused on money, really, or connecting people who aren't just in the same neighborhood. If you can just shout at your friend, you're probably going to shout as opposed to Facebook message them. But when
or Tinder them across the room or across the bar.
So Lena,
really do that.
you're talking about
send it away.
improving lifestyle. Is that what where you're getting at?
What I'm going to say is that it's actually different for students. For students who want to achieve in school, and yes, maybe that's the issue. Not all students who want can't or whatever. But for students who want to improve in school, having the ability to type your essay is invaluable. City College is a commuter school. The reason the library is honestly pretty popular is because the home is loud, regardless of if it has a computer there or not. Finding study space in New York City is really hard because New York City is really loud. So I'd say in addition to that tablet or that laptop, if you're really looking to help your kid get ahead, soundproof headphones. And explaining you have this much time to be online to find your resources, and then I'm turning the internet off. Once you have those resources, you just have to write, because that's actually the big hurdle. If you start getting good at the internet stuff,
Diversion.
yeah, you're just, it's not going to help you in school. But those are skill sets that some people can get, some people can't. But I would say the difference it makes in the life of a student to be able to write their paper, when I've had teachers who said, you have to type this, and it meant some people had to go to the computer lab. But if you're in a place that doesn't have that option, and you're required to do online homework, because I think that's a big chunk of this that isn't coming out. Teachers are assigning homework that you have to be online for on the assumption that it's normal to have a computer at home, it's normal to have internet access, and it's not true. Not everybody has
even
it.
the assignments themselves are being delivered online. So if you're not connected, you're up the creek.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you some data on it, but I want to go to a more interesting question, as in what should be done about this and how it could be changed, and I have some ideas. The classic study looked at schools with computers and without computers. These days, any school in the United States that doesn't have computers, often in every classroom, often in a lab, doesn't know how to fill out the paperwork to get the government money that covers it. It's almost everywhere. That's a good thing. How much difference did it make when they looked at a large number of schools? This is far enough back that many didn't have computers. The answer was the difference was too small to measure. It wasn't even 10%.
Now this difference,
Standard
hold on.
achievement tests.
Okay, standard achievement tests. I'm going to say this right now. Those are some just complete insert strings of profanity here. Like, that is how much I hate standardized tests. The reason it is, like, they're terrible. I'm not talking
No disagreement.
about, I mean,
But
the idea that they
it
don't
is a
make
data
it,
point.
the idea that they
And
don't
you have
make a
any better
difference
way
for,
to measure it?
yes, college applications. If you don't
No,
have a
people
computer, you
are
can't
applying to
apply.
college overwhelmingly, who are so poor they don't have a computer, overwhelmingly are higher motivated. We started this out with my saying, yeah, some people will really get into it. And that's great. And I'm not against getting it.
No, I mean, you can't apply to college without a computer. Like,
Yeah,
you
but
can't
you know
put
anybody who can't get to the library and that's once-in-a-lifetime experience?
I have met so many people who came to the library desk and said, this is my first time here. And I said, you mean at this library? And they said, at any library. They were able to get here without being at a library because they had the privilege of having a computer to do the application. Like, you can go ahead and say, oh, there's libraries. If libraries didn't have all of their hours being cut constantly to the point that people can't go in and use the computers, that they're overwhelmed, I would have more sympathy for the notion that, oh, well, libraries can fix it. No, libraries are having their budget cuts, they're having their labs closed, they're having their hours shortened. No, libraries aren't going to cut it. People need their own computers.
At home.
Yeah. And
we can disagree on that. I think it's
Well, then let me just weigh
but
in.
it's
I
not
agree with you,
easy to
Lena. I mean, the lines, Dave. It's like take a number, stand in line, and you only have 30 minutes or whatever. Your time is constrained, and you got to get back at the end of the line again once your time is up. And then you have young kids that are out. I mean, it's dark at 5 o'clock now. You're gonna send your young daughter or even your young son out to the library in the dark? I mean,
oh, it's not open after 5. Don't worry.
Oh, sorry.
Their hours have been slashed. Oh, you mean the local branch? No, you're gonna have to go down to 42nd Street. You can't get the library.
Yeah, so
Like,
that is not a solution. Not even a Band-Aid.
I mean, I would like it if it was, because the thing is that the idea that people say, oh, well, the library can take care of it. Yeah, they could if they had sufficient funding. And I'm not saying we shouldn't fund them. I would be very keen on saying, yeah, let's have it be a world where that fixes it. And the idea, if someone is sufficiently motivated, does that make a difference or not? But I would also say, what role did the computers in the schools have in those standardized tests? Because if the teachers are teaching towards the tests, it doesn't matter. The computers are a tool. I would say a better impact would be scores on the SAT, like essay portion. Because if you had access to a computer, if you're doing some of those computerized tests, the difference in scores there, that would be telling. How comfortable are these students with this form of testing?
I know one of the things, I was a pretty good student in high school, and one of the most valuable skills that I learned, two valuable skills. One was writing, the other was typing. We had a typing class in junior high school. I became quite a good typist. When I went to college, at least half my male friends didn't have a clue about typing. But also to your point, Lena, about having a laptop and being able to write narratively, to practice that, to do it. We did theme papers and term papers in high school over and over. I was a very good writer by the time I got to college, and that served me extremely well.
I would say one of the most shocking things about when I went into my undergraduate program was I met all of these kids who were from the kind of prestigious high school systems in New York City. So like they were coming out of the science and engineering high school. They couldn't write. They could do a lot of math, but they couldn't write, and college is so much about writing, almost to the point where it's like, well, listen, guys, maybe we don't need to write this much, although I'm never going to say that and mean it, because it's an incredibly important skill. But the idea that they didn't know the 5-paragraph essay, which is just intro, point, cover your points, conclusion.
Right.
Like, that's it. They hadn't encountered it. Whereas I came out of a different school system that's all I learned.
Right.
Over and over again, to the point that I just ignored it.
But that has served you not only in college, I'm sure, throughout you're not that old yet compared to an old guy like me, but I know in my business career, writing proposals, writing grant proposals, writing marketing pieces, I mean, throughout my professional career, writing has been fundamental.
The idea that writing is something that is separate from computers is foreign to me. I can't spell. It's a problem. If I was writing with my pen, it's a problem. I'm not. I'm writing with a computer. It has spell check. I can be like, I composed a letter that I had to write on paper earlier today. It was terrible. I turned to my phone and I said define, colon, and different words I wanted to make, like mischief. Am I spelling mischief correctly? I actually checked on my phone to go out to Google and look it up. And that's one of my favorite tricks, by the way. Define, colon, and then whatever you want to have defined, you put that into Google. Instead of having results, the first thing it'll do is define that word.
Okay.
Or phrase. That kind of tool, when it starts becoming the supplementary to what you're writing, when you're looking at thesaurus,
so it's kind of like your dictionary or thesaurus, right?
Yeah, because those are also tools you need online.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have them in paper.
Mm-hmm.
You can have, but, So I would say looking at standardized testing, I don't think is a great metric.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at, although I can say I understand the desire for the numbers, of how much help would a computer at home be. But to some extent, I just want to look at the quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Folks,
I didn't say quality of life. I said schoolwork.
well,
I
yeah,
didn't say computers weren't great for the quality of life.
I think
But the
computers
research
help
has
both.
been done. Getting more broadband, getting faster broadband, very rarely has an economic impact, although lots of people will say it did. The best work, which is lousy because it's based on things like standard tests, which are not reliable, is that putting computers in school made very different, had very little effect, which surprised everybody. But you got to face it. But
I
we
think
can't
that's
solve
not
it here.
true.
None
I
of
think
us have the data.
How old is that data? I'm fine with going, we
Old.
don't have the data. I'm just not,
I said it was old.
yeah, I'm not
Well,
cool with your data.
If it's old,
But
Dave,
you don't
I
have
don't
any
think
data,
it.
and you can't have any data because it doesn't exist on a good study of what's there now.
All
So
right.
let's talk about
So my fingers
how
are
you can
itching
make
to
this
go
better.
to eric.gov. Eric.gov is the educational resource index collection, I think, online. And it's this mostly open source thing where I'm like, no, I bet they have some newer data on this. Like, Eric is for sure into covering some of this, but if it's not there, I've got a direction
you
towards
can't get
tenure.
that data in the United States recently because for at least 5 years, almost every school has had a computer. But it doesn't matter. We're not going to get anywhere with this. And if we had the data, you could pick apart how they did the study, and I could pick apart how they did the study.
Well, that's
Now,
that's an
Should we
epistemological
stop
argument.
putting- should we? Before you said one of the good ways to get into this was for mobile phones, and I agree. Mobile phones are not where you're going to write a term paper, but you can do a lot of other things on them, and you can do most of the things you want to do on the web. Should the United States cut back on mobile phones for poor kids?
Should they
That's
cut
back?
proposed by 2 of the 5 commissioners of the FCC right now, and the others are probably going to go along because they don't understand it or whatever politics.
Wait, do you mean they're talking about taking away the the colloquially called the Obama phone? Are you talking about that?
They've had, way before Obama got there, a program that for $10 poor people could get the phone.
Yeah, I was saying
Yeah.
colloquially called, not correctly called. So the $10 smartphone plan. It's,
And now it's starting to get to smartphones because smartphones are down to $50 and $70
yeah,
in large volume. Okay, they're saying that they want to chop that heavily, partly by putting so much paperwork in that many people will be discouraged, and definitively by creating a big database that will probably cost more than it would save to make sure that nobody gets more than one in a family, which is more likely to go to the adult who really needs it than the 13-year-old kid because the adult needs to keep in touch from work and so on. It certainly would result. Right now, a kid can get one and his mother can get one. Great. They want to eliminate that. It would have a major impact, probably more than any program we could imagine on computers, on how many kids could connect to the internet.
yeah.
Is that a good idea?
I would much prefer they expand the program and give everyone else phones. Like,
And laptops. How about laptops? I mean,
I-
where's the government on funding schools to give laptops to the kids?
well, that is happening. That's
Okay.
because they're spying on them with them.
Oh, right.
Like
that's right.
I did mention that
You did
before.
mention that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Dave. That is a heartbreaking shift in policy.
And I would bet, but I can't prove it, so let's not get into it one way or the other, that giving smartphones, spending $1 billion giving smartphones to kids would do more than spending the $1 billion on the computers. But none of us really know.
See, I don't
What's
think
your
that's
thinking
true.
behind that, Dave? What are your presumptions behind that?
That you can do most of what you want to do on a smartphone. 8% of the people connecting in the U.S. right now do it on smartphones. and the number is going up dramatically in poor countries. It's been particularly popular among Black and Latinos, as you mentioned, and it's a great thing. So I'm not against getting the kids computers.
Okay,
Just
I
the
would
question
say.
of whether that's the first priority. I believe they're seriously overspending on computers in schools at the moment, or at least in the proposals they have sitting in Washington right now for another $1 billion.
So I
It's
would.
not going to change this. They're not going to be enough better to be worth it.
So what I think is going on is the difference in goal, because you have a very fixed goal. You want everybody online, you want them all connected. You find that an empowering notion, which is true, and I'm not arguing it. But if you can't write a paper on it, it's not going to help with a certain corner of the importance of education, the importance of writing. So I would say, instead, I'm gonna propose a third notion. Instead of just regular phones, it should be those really fat phones. You know what I'm talking about? The fatlets?
No, what are you
All
talking
right,
about?
so there is a mix between a phone and a tablet. My brother really wants one where you can get a 7-inch screen on a phone.
Wow,
it's pretty much
7-inch screen
There's
on
a
a
no
phone.
difference between a phone and a tablet when you go inside, by and large, except the phone connection. In fact,
Yes.
The first tablets overwhelmingly, in the volume, other than the Apple, overwhelmingly came by people taking a cell phone design and putting a bigger
So
screen
it's a
on.
tablet with a phone
Yeah.
feature.
So what I'm saying is, I think what the government should be pushing, if I was able to just be like, hey government, do this, give us all 7 to 10 inch tablets with keyboards that are also phones, because then we're all connected. It doesn't have to be that much data, because part of it is people want to watch video. Okay, if you want to watch video, you need to find a different way to connect. If you want to just send emails, search web pages, that takes so much less power that you could just cap the limit on the data. And yes, some people would hack the system. That is normal for any system. But the idea that we need something that is in between a phone and a laptop. And I would say 10-inch, 7-inch, giant phone tablet things. There you go. That's my solution. I'm just going to come out of left field with that
What do you think about that, Dave?
I think that's a whole nother discussion.
Fair
And I want
response.
to get to the points of what we can practically do on this kind of issues.
Okay,
One of
go.
them is, on that, right now there's a proposal to take many, probably most, of those smartphones away from teenagers.
You mean that they're in their hands and they're going to remove them, or they're going to stop giving them
they're
away?
going to stop paying them.
They're going to stop paying for it. That's
Okay.
actually at the FCC as a notice of proposed rulemaking and will probably go through.
What's the population
got
size
really
of that? How
angry
many,
at
Dave?
the
Excuse me for
FCC
interrupting.
show.
How many phones are we talking about? A million, 10 million, 20 million? What are we talking about?
There's got to be tens of millions in the whole program. How many would lose them? Almost certainly would be in the millions. Probably. The
Okay.
Republicans who are saying they're going to save money by all these rule changes are talking about getting rid of tens of millions that they think aren't appropriate, many of which don't live up to the rules, which always have been one for family, but it was never enforced.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad rule. Now, let's go to another one, current, this kind of issue, ones where people can make a difference. We all agree that the best system will get a decent internet for everybody for free.
Agreed.
And you've worked on that hard in the Bronx and in Manhattan. Great. And if we could get that, I'm all for it. However, most people's choices right now start in New York City, start at $25, and the majority of them are $40 to $80. Is it important that there be a decent offering at $10 for poor people, say everybody who qualifies for food stamps? Is that an important issue? It happens to be being discussed right now by both New York City and state.
I mean, I'm happy to say it's an important issue, but that doesn't mean I agree with the framing or how it's being implemented. And honestly, the pushes for free internet in New York City make me have a lot more warm, fuzzy feelings inside. But even that has its own problems. So I think my response on this one is kind of a disappointing shrug.
Yeah, I'm not happy with that $10 offer either, Dave. For a lot of poor folks, that's going to be a hurdle. I mean, it
No
sounds
disagreement.
if you
But
have a
there's
job,
nobody
if
with
you have
a
income, steady
proposal
income,
likely
that
to go through in the next couple of years to bring free to even a quarter of the poor kids in New York. I wish it were different. And the Wi-Fi has the technology capacity to do it if it's designed well and put everywhere, which it may or may not. It's a big fight.
yeah. Well, as you know, you made alluded to it earlier. I work with a lot of community groups that are sharing and propagating free Wi-Fi in their communities, and we think that's something that really is much needed and has the potential to really have a real impact. To come in with a $10 a month internet service, it sounds good on paper, but you've got to go through the hurdles of qualifying with your kid in the free lunch program. A lot of folks are gonna that's gonna be a hurdle right there, going through the whole qualification process and applying and.
I mean, what's
and
funny about
meeting
having
the criteria.
ubiquitous Wi-Fi around is anyone can connect to it. Like there's all these infrastructure stops if you're having a $10 plan where you have to have the thing in your house. You have to let the people into your house. You have to be in the same place. Like if it's just Wi-Fi that's around, that's actually way easier to connect to. So I'm not buying the $10 a month plan, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be, because New York City and other places have very different infrastructure realities. So I would say in some ways $10 a month doesn't make sense for New York City, but it might make sense for Albany, it might make sense for Buffalo or Rochester, but in the density of New York City, I want Wi-Fi for everyone.
Well, that's why I'm talking about a wired connection over cable, running rock solid at 5 megabits, which is enough for HDTV, and having a program that's easy to get qualified for by and large. For example, by qualifying everybody with a kid in a school where 70% of the kids qualify for food stamps. That's a realistic program because Comcast is doing just that, and actually quite well. I've looked at it closely. The complaints are unfair. For us, about 30% of the United States. I'm going to the wall. I'm not going to the wall, but I'm pushing hard, among other things, getting a motion through the Internet Society of New York that in the takeover of Time Warner by Charter and the takeover of Cablevision by the French, they'd be required to have a program like Comcast program. Not great, but it's a heck of a lot better than the choices most people have, and we can probably win that one. If Comcast is doing it, there's no reason Time Warner needs to do it, especially since both of the mergers are in trouble and they're scared. New York City actively has jumped into this, at least in the Cablevision case. It's not publicized anywhere, I know, but they are making that kind of demand a decent offering for the school kids as part of the agreement to change the franchise. And I say, yeah, that's important. That's something that should be right there.
Okay, Dave, we got to wind it up here. I think Lena and I still have issues with that $10 a month deal.
Yeah, I take it back. I want all of it. I just want I want both programs. Okay, we will be back next week,
Yes, we
right?
will.
And
We will be back next
Okay.
week, and hopefully we're going to have some guests from the community so you can hear from them about what the impact of a $10 a month internet is. To hear from them about what it's like to not have free broadband in their community. So,
And give me 15 seconds, 10 seconds.
quickly, Dave.
And I believe that the proposals on hand that people are talking of an FCC subsidy for poor people's computers, is a mistake. Is the way they wrote it and the way they're probably going to write it, most of the money was going to go to the company's profits, not to getting more people connected. And that happens too often in Washington.
Okay.
So long.
Thanks, Dave. You've been listening to Dave Burstein, Lena Marvin, and Stu Reed on community and technology on WHCR FM 90.3. Stay tuned for News at 6 with Brother Bill.
Ellington, you don't live around here. He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
It's 61 degrees. Bill DeFrost at WHCR 90.3 News. The vicious band of terrorists, formerly known as Boko Haram, that have been wreaking havoc in West Africa, is using women and young girls to carry out suicide bombings. To date, there have been 53 female suicide